Imposter syndrome says we're not authors.
But here's our books.
And here's our podcast. We are two book nerds talking about our indie author experiences
to spread the love of indie publishing and help other indies not feel alone.
Thanks for joining us, and now on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Indie Book Nerds podcast. We are your hosts, Jade Neoma
and Morgan Christensen. Today, we're excited to welcome our guest, Emma Couette.
Hello.
Welcome on, Emma. A brief author description for you. Emma Couette is a young adult fantasy and dystopian author from Southern Ontario. She has written a few award-winning short stories and dabbles in poetry when the inspiration strikes her. Her dreams include traveling the world, being a mom, and owning a small library. Silent Night is her debut novel, the first of many adventures.
A little bit more into Silent Night. In a future world, the skyscrapers of Haven City have crumbled, and the government of today is no more. Death lurks around every corner, and tomorrow is not promised. The Resistance and the Assassin's Guild fight for control of the city, but after decades of a silent war, no one expects victory. In this lawless city, enemies are abundant, but three people are feared above all: the Charger, Black Death, and the mysterious assassin called Silent Night. This book contains content themes that may not be suitable for all readers, including death, graphic violence, abuse, manipulation, alcoholism, death of a child, and mental health issues such as panic attacks. It should also be noted that Book 3 contains a non-POV character suicide that the POV character does witness. Please read at your own discretion.
Welcome on, Emma. Could you tell us a little bit more about your novel, like in your own words, and let us know when it released?
Yeah, so Silent Night, again, is a YA dystopian novel, and it actually released in October of 2019, so last month was its 5-year anniversary. And yeah, it's my debut novel, so it's held a special place in my heart this whole time. And I want more people to discover it. It's got assassins, it's got enemies to lovers romance, found family, lots of action. If you can't tell from the trigger warnings, there's a lot of action going on. And very dark at times, but I also try to weave in a lot of hope into it, a lot of character growth, redemption arcs. It's really hard to describe it in better terms than the synopsis does, because I know everything about this book, so I have to try to talk about it without saying things that'll spoil it. So I try to just keep to the synopsis, because I know that doesn't spoil anything.
My cup of tea, for sure. All the darkness and the fantasy, and it sounds really cool. And it is hard to kind of break down, 90K to over 100K words. So finding out that synopsis and what works for describing your book is a challenge. But I think you did it really well, and it sounds really cool. Well, to pivot from your book, what is your writing journey? Like, what brought you to the writer you are today?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. It'll be 11 years in March since I seriously started writing novels. I wrote my first book when I was 6 years old, and it was a picture book without pictures. That was about a girl that wanted a pet, and she ends up at the end of the book buying a dog for $2, because that's what I thought dogs cost at 6 years old, which is, I think it's hilarious now. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh my God, that makes no sense. But that's when it started. I was an avid reader since before I can remember. I was reading novels at 6 years old. And I was always writing something. Like ever since that first little picture book, I wrote another picture book after that. I started all these little novels where the plots were terrible and mostly just like rehashes of the books that I was reading at the time. But it was something. I was testing up my muscles. But it didn't actually occur to me that I could be an author until I was just before I went into high school. I decided that I wanted to write a whole novel from start to finish, because I never actually finished anything over the years. So I wanted to challenge myself to do the whole thing and then decide if I wanted to keep writing or not. And I wrote funnily enough, Silent Night is not the first book I wrote. It's the third book I wrote, but the first book I published. So the first book I wrote is Summer's Revenge, and it's a fantasy novel, and that was the one that started the whole journey. It took me 2 years to write the first draft, and after that, there was no going back. And a part of me is like, if I'd never done that, maybe I wouldn't be like, it's just, my life would be completely different. But I'm thankful for it every day because I love what I do. And so the idea for Silent Night actually didn't come until, I want to say, a year or two after I finished Summer's Revenge, like the first draft. Obviously, it had a lot more work to go through before it could be readed, before it could be read by the general public. But Silent Night came along when I was doing a bunch of like writing exercises, testing out my writing muscles, reading all kinds of books on writing. And I was doing a bunch of show don't tell prompts where you have to like rewrite something to show the reader the emotions. So instead of, for example, one of them was Sharon was nervous, and you had to rewrite the prompt to show the readers that Sharon was nervous without actually ever saying that she was nervous, right? And so I wrote this scene based on that prompt, and it was from the perspective of this person hiding behind a garbage can, watching the proceedings. And when I finished the scene, the character said something like, Na has something to tell the charger. And I finished writing it, and I was like, who's the charger? Like, where did that come from? And who is this person hiding behind the garbage can and why? And who is this Sharon character? Like, it was supposed to be like this one-off little prompt, but like my brain made it into this like whole scene, and I had so many questions. And that is actually the beginning. Well, it's not the first scene in Silent Night, but that's the scene that began the entire novel, and it's still in the book, but Sharon is now called Rachel. And like literally the entire book bloomed out of that one like random prompt that I did. And I honestly don't know where the rest of it really came from. It was influenced, of course, by the books I was reading at the time, but it really came out of nowhere.
Yeah. I love hearing about your writing journey and how you kind of started at this really young age. You said like 6 years old with the picture book with no pictures. And I actually had somewhat of a similar start. I wrote a book for my class. I think it was probably in second grade. And it was essentially rainbow fish, but with feathers and somehow darker because the whole overlying message was change yourself for others and don't be unique because others won't like you for it. So you can tell that I have changed and adapted since as an author and definitely don't write things, well, definitely still dark, but maybe with a better message now. So yeah, I definitely love seeing how that has changed so much and how you kind of got that inspiration for Silent Night. Well, Emma, tell us, what is it about dystopian settings like Haven City that are appealing for you when it comes to storytelling? Is there something that draws you to writing dystopian stories?
Dystopian is one of my favorite genres. My ultimate favorite genre is fantasy, and that's the other genre that I do write in. But dystopian kind of took hold of me in my like early teenage years. I read Legend by Marie Lu, which is a huge inspiration for Silent Night itself. I read Divergent. I read The Hunger Games. I read the entire dystopian catalog at my library that I could find. And I think what brought me back to it again and again is just like books are political. And I know that that's been like a big like controversy lately about, are books political? Are they not? Should they be? But it's never more apparent than in dystopian books where you can really lay out your worldviews and really comment on the state of the world. Obviously, it's in other genres as well, but I feel like dystopian allows you to get more in depth to really talk about it. And I just love that. I love seeing people have like the what if questions, like what if our world looked this way? And my favorite part about dystopian is that it usually takes a utopian idea and then flips it on its head. So, like, for example, like, in Divergent, what if we, you know, split people depending on their, like, their virtues? Like, the honest people got to be together and the intelligent people got to stay together. And, like, it sounds like a really good idea on the surface, but the books show how it's not that easy. Like you can't just come up with this really great idea for society and have it actually work. Like, and I love that about dystopian societies is they poke holes in these theories that people have and show that we exist in shades of gray and nothing is ever black and white. And that's what I love about the genre. And I like also from a writing perspective that it's our world, but not our world at the same time. So like I with fantasy books, you have to, create a whole new world most of the time, which is a lot of work as an author. But then with like contemporary books, it's okay, you don't have to create a world because it's set on Earth, but you're also like beholden to all like the current like the way that the world currently works. So if you're writing a romance set in New York, well, you've got to be really friggin' familiar with New York City because it's an actual place that exists. But if you're writing a dystopian set in New York, you have all this like leeway because it's not our society the way we know it. And I like it that about it because it makes it a little bit easier. You can kind of bend the rules, bend reality a bit and make it your own while still not having to create a whole new world. So yeah, that's what draws me to dystopians is the ideas that we can tackle.
100% to all of that. Um, yeah, I feel like there is that controversy, especially going on right now. And I think it's only going on because we're dealing at this moment with such a you know politically like high kind of like landscape, and so we're all like thinking about it. It's all on our minds. But it does. I feel like books are any art is a way to express what is kind of going on in our worlds, whether it be internal, external. And I think that books are just a great way of showcasing all of that and making it like kind of putting it into context. Um, I like that idea of the utopia because it is a lot of books or stories are like that where we take like this one idea that looks ideal and like a really good idea. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender or The Legend of Korra, but I'm such a nerd. It reminds me of Legend of Korra. Each villain is like of each season was like a different. They went to an extreme of a different thing that would be ideal. Like one of them was freedom. Well, and then their freedom became like it was just to the extreme, and they ended up harming others. And I barely remember how it went, but something to that effect. So yeah, and we can take those ideas and really stretch them out to just kind of beat the crap out of them, but safely with words and not other people, which is nice. Um, well, what made you choose the elements of your book that you did? For example, why did you choose an assassin's guild, the resistance, and enemies to lovers?
Yeah, so again, a lot of it is inspired by the books I was reading at the time. Like I'll take bits and pieces of certain things and be like, well, what if you took this character and mix them with this world and put in this conflict, and then you get a whole new thing. And obviously, as you write it, it becomes even more distant from where its original inspiration came from. But the Assassin's Guild aspect came from Throne of Glass. And I searched so hard to find a different name for the Assassin's Guild, but nothing was like any better. So it's called the Assassin's Guild in my book. It's called the Assassin's Guild in Throne of Glass. You can't get away from it. There's only so many words that exist in the English language. But yeah, the basically I kind of said to myself, well, what would happen if you took Selena Sardossian and you put her in a dystopian world instead of a fantasy world? And that's kind of the basic premise for the assassins part. I wanted a main character who wasn't the good guy at the beginning, who wasn't entirely the bad guy either. Like she's really morally gray. She does bad things. She's killed people before, and she is in this really dark place in her life. And the story is her journey of trying to get away from that, trying to become a better person, trying to make good choices, trying to save people instead of harm people, and how difficult that is. And I just really wanted a unique, like badass, strong female character who had to really grow through the story. And it's not so like it's a tale of accepting herself, like a lot of female characters go through, but she started from a very much lower position than a lot of characters do. And I really just love assassins as well. There's so much that you can like it just really lends itself to the action when you have a character that knows how to fight. It's, there's a lot of stories where the main character finds it's themselves, needing to fight a war or whatever, and they have to learn how to fight along the way. And it's funny because Silent really has to almost learn to fight less. Um, and then the Resistance, of course, I needed something to stand against the Assassin's Guild because we can't have them just be running amok in the city. So the Resistance is what's left of the city's original like standing army, and they're trying to bring back democracy. They're trying to quash the assassins, trying to return the city to its former glory, and so that people don't have to live in fear anymore. And yeah, I really like creating them. They're supposed to be like, the moral upholders, but they also have their flaws as well. And that's another thing I like about Dystopian, is that you get to show that neither side of any war is really black and white. They both do bad things in the name of the cause that they believe is good. So, yep, I like that part. And then enemies to lovers is my favorite trope, without a doubt. I think I include some element of it in all the books that I write to different extents. And in this book, it's not so much that I want to kill you and then I fall in love with you. It's more on the stance of the male love interest hates the assassins and everything they stand for and thinks that they all need to be exterminated. And the main character, Silent, hates the resistance and thinks that they have oppressed her whole life. And when they meet and have to work together, they soon discover, like I said, that it's not so black and white as they would like to believe. And in their arc of their romance is discovering that one person doesn't stand for the entire group, and the group doesn't necessarily mean that the person believes in it. So yeah.
I love that 100%. Yeah, because all of that strikes true, right? You know, the internet's a terrible place, but one side or the other doesn't speak for like the whole. That doesn't necessarily mean, when one side or the other kind of treats your ideas, um, or yeah, treats your ideas with any sort of kind of disrespect, that you have to listen to them. But I mean, yeah, in a situation like that where they would have to work together and to be able to cooperate with each other, they'd probably figure out, oh, um, that's a message in a lot of stories that I like a lot too. So, oh gosh, I'm gonna add your book to my TBR some more. Um, let's see. I mean, awesome. So we've talked about your incredibly strong female character, which I also like. Um, so, um, can you tell us more about her story, like her history and motivations? Kind of elaborate on her morally grayness, maybe.
Yeah. So Silent has had a rough life. Um, and it just kept piling more things on her, and I feel bad about it, but it's what she needed to be for the story. But basically, she was orphaned at 5 years old. She used to live with her mother in a basically regular house in Haven City. And obviously, she was 5, so she didn't really know the state of the city, but she had a happy life. And then her mother was killed. Silent was the one who found the body, and shortly after the Assassin's Guild showed up, some assassins came and they told her, the resistance has killed your mother. You can come with us and we will train you to so that you can one day avenge her, right? And so then she's brought to the guild to become basically the Assassin's Guild collects orphans off the street and they train them to become assassins, and it's kind of like an endless supply of new assassins, new people that they can raise themselves with their ideals. And then they don't know anything different, all they know is the Assassin's Guild. And so Silent is brought up in this brutal environment where there's not a lot of love to go around, there's not a lot of play, not a lot of relaxation. It's just constant learning and training and all that stuff, backstabbing, and like everybody for themselves kind of society is in the Assassin's Guild. And she becomes a proper assassin at 10 years old. She earns the title Silent Night around 1112 and also becomes an executioner. So yeah, Silent Night's not her real name. In the city, really notorious assassins are given titles by the population. So Silent Night is what people call her when they think that she's done the assassination. And so she latches onto this name and basically like destroys her old persona, but she doesn't know anything else. And it's her lifetime goal to A, destroy the resistance in any way that she can for what they did to her and her mother, and B, become the best assassin that she can. So when the story starts, she's Agent 2, and obviously there's Agent 1 above her, and then the Master Assassin at the very top. And it's her lifetime goal to be Agent 1, and then someday when the Master Assassin retires, she wants to become the Master Assassin herself. And so she's just spent her whole life, like, doing this relentlessly. It's all she thinks about, it's all she has time for. Like, she's obsessed with this goal. And then near the beginning of the book, it's not a spoiler because I think it happens in like chapter 3, she finds out that it was not, in fact, the resistance that killed her mother. And so she switches sides over to the resistance because it's not so much that she's loyal to the guild and their ideals. It's like her loyalty is to her mother and her vengeance. And it doesn't matter who did it. She just wants to get that revenge. And so she switches over to the resistance, but she's had all this upbringing of being an assassin, and so it's really hard for her to just throw that all away. And yeah, that's her in a nutshell. She is very angry, very sad, just very stuck in her ways, and has walls around all of her emotions and doesn't want anybody to get in. So yeah.
Yeah, and I can see definitely how that hatred for the resistance was started based off of what happened to her mother, and then her just trying to cope with that in the best way that she can. She's an orphan, she's a small child taken in and forced to become and train as an assassin. It makes sense. Like, I think her motivations definitely lie within being an assassin, at first. And then when she realizes that that's not who killed her mother, I can see how she's still going to struggle with kind of what she's been programmed with, I guess you could say, like all the things that she's been used to thinking, and to have to like now be on the other side and to help the resistance. And now she's got this enemies to lovers situation. And I think it sounds definitely really interesting. Will you tell us what your favorite scene or dialogue was to write?
So my favorite scene is when we first meet the Master Assassin through Silent Night. Obviously, Silent Night's seen him many times before, but it's the first time that the reader gets to see him. So she's going to a meeting with him. I push the door open and step into the Charger's office. A single lamp illuminates the space, and the Charger sits behind a tall oak desk opposite the door, almost blending into the shadows with his black fatigues and dark skin. The room around him seems to breathe, and I try not to think about the stack of skulls shelved on the left wall where the light can't reach. I try not to think about the eyes watching me from the darkness or about the blood-red carpet beneath my boots. It used to be white, once upon a time. The Charger smiles as I enter, all teeth and no eyes, like neither are aware of the other's agenda. There is warmth in that smile, but it's an inferno. Something to keep an eye on lest it swallow you whole. Every time I see that smile, I understand why the people named him Black Death. He smiles his evil smile and says, "Hello, Silent Night. I've been expecting you."
Wow. Incredible. Yeah, I like that too. I think that pile of skulls sounds really, really spooky. I think it definitely adds to the characterization of the Master Assassin, and definitely with a name like you said, it was Black Death.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a fitting name for sure. Will you tell us what the most difficult scene or dialogue was to write?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question, and I can't really think of a single scene that was really difficult to write, but more of like a concept to the book. So actually, it was the romance that I had the hardest time getting right. And I had to I wrote the first draft and I went back, and I think I sent it to a critique partner after I wrote the second draft, I think it was. And she basically said that the romance is there, but it's all wrong at the same time. And so I had to go back through the book and rewrite like that whole arc to make it more realistic. We found that the characters got together too quickly, that they weren't acting in character a lot of the times. And so I actually ended up having to write a bunch of the scenes, like the pivotal scenes in the romance arc, through the male's perspective to get a better idea of like how he would naturally react in these scenes. And then once I did that, I had to rewrite the actual perspective of the book to fit in the pieces that I discovered when doing this like little exercise. And it took a while, but I think I did manage to get that right in the end. But that was the most difficult thing, was to really make the romance realistic given the two characters' personalities and not making it happen as easily as I want to. So like I string the reader on a little longer, but it's what's most realistic for the characters. And yeah, I really like how it ends up being in the end, but it was really hard to get it right.
Yeah, I can relate to that. My my book started out as like a romance in its original draft. And then, yeah, I also got somebody who read it and was like, so with all the crap these two have been through together, they wouldn't fall in love so quickly and easily like that. They've got too much going on. And then eventually, like, well, I can't spoil, but yes, I had to rewrite, and I also had to add the guy's POV because I kind of wanted him to be like the mysterious and rugged love interest, and will they, won't they? He's so, we don't know much about him, and then people were like, I love this guy, I need more about him, and I was like, oh, okay, so I had to like rewrite her POV from his POV, and that was like actually kind of fun. And then I was like, I like this rewriting thing. It's not that bad. So I can totally relate. And in the end, I agree. It's better for our characters. It's more realistic. It's a believable story, and yeah, it's that's awesome that you were able to do that. Well, which character gave you the most trouble as an author?
I also had a hard time with this one because this book, I actually wrote the first draft of Silent Night during NaNoWriMo, and I wrote 34,000 words, I think it was, in November, and then an additional like 54,000 in December for 87,000 words in like 57 days, I think it was. So this book just like poured out of me, and I didn't really have a lot of trouble with the characters. But if I think back into like revisions and stuff, I want to say it's probably Blake. Now, she is a resistance soldier. She is part of like the group of friends that the main character finds herself with. So there's Jax, Bast, and Blake. And Blake is like kind of like the mother figure, the brains of the operation, but she's also super quiet. And her and Quinn, sorry, I have too many character names. Her and Silent, they they butt heads a lot at the beginning, and it was really hard to get them into any sort of like friendship and to try to keep Blake's character separate. Like I had a hard time making sure that each of the characters had their own personalities because there's a lot of like, strong female characters in this book, but I like they can't all be like the same, right? So I had a lot of trouble figuring out what is Blake's motivation, who is she, and how is she different from Silent, from Jax, from Bass, and from the other characters. So I had a lot of fun with her, but she did give me some trouble.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that name, Blake, for her. Yeah. It's always in the rewrites where the characters kind of reveal themselves and they go, so actually, I know you wrote it this way, but I'm actually like this. And then you have to go back and you're like, God dang it, you little gremlin. So, no,
No,
that's awesome.
work
What's that?
It's like you want to shake them and be like, "Do you know how much work that is to fix this?"
Obviously, they don't. They're just like, you put all this trauma on me. You can rewrite something. Look at all I've been through. You can rewrite words, you fool. Oh, well. Uh, in the most affectionate way, you fool. Um, okay, awesome. So you mentioned your book tackles themes such as fighting for what's right and not what's easy, as well as learning not to just live but thrive. Can you tell us about how you represented these themes in your book?
Yeah, so fighting for what's right, not what's easy, is basically Silent's entire story arc. Is first of all, she has to like figure out, what is right and wrong, because she's just been her whole world's been turned upside down because she thought she was on the right side and now she's not so sure. And, it's been her whole life so easy to just, follow orders, kill these people, come back, eat, sleep, repeat. And now she has to take, the hard path of, doing the inner work of like trying to figure out, like, okay, who am I? Have I been doing the right thing? Have I been doing the wrong thing? And if I have been doing the wrong thing, like, what do I do differently? And just, it's a hard path for her to take to really do the deep inner work and question things and not, just take the first answer that comes to her. So, yeah, it's definitely about her journey of finding morality and what that means. And then the other side of things, learning to survive, learning to live, not just survive. She's just been in a constant like fight or flight her whole life. And it's just survival of the fittest, doing whatever you can to meet one more day. And in getting to the resistance and finding this group of friends, she learns that there's more to life than just survival, and that it's okay to take a break, to breathe, to laugh, to have fun. Maybe it's okay to love. And it takes her a long time to really understand this lesson and to find that there's things in her life worth dying for, when in the past it's just been survive. Like, if she had made a friend when she was younger and she was told to, kill them or be killed, she would have killed them without any hesitation. And now she's learning that, some people are worth like sacrificing yourself for and certain things like that. So, yeah, I really enjoyed telling that story, that, living is only so good as what you do with it. Just, sitting at home in your bubble and never taking any risks or any chances. You stay alive and you stay comfortable, but, real happiness and success and excitement are outside of that comfort zone. And that's kind of the theme that I was trying to get across.
Yeah, thank you for giving us that deeper look into your character's kind of her character arc and the overlying message in your book. I think for someone to have the history that she does, it is very impactful and powerful that she is learning and adapting, even if it does take her quite a long time to learn this lesson and to really let it sink in. I do like that that's something that she is choosing to learn, especially from the perspective of, being so morally gray and being an assassin when we start the novel with her, and to see her to grow like that across the novel is great. To pivot more towards you, what's your typical writing routine or creative process?
Yeah, so writing routine lately has not been very much of a routine. I don't have as much time as I used to have when I was first writing my stories. So I used to write like mostly weekends and mornings and really any time that I could, and almost all the time. But now I've been having to find like little pockets of time here and there to just dip my toes into the writing. And it's been really interesting trying to learn how to do that and keep the narrative in your head when you're not touching it every day. And yeah, so basically, I have some mornings where I'll write before work. I'll have, some evenings where I find time, but I don't typically, like, I can't schedule it the way that I used to. So it's just a, hey, it's 8 o'clock. I don't have anything else going on. I have like about 2 hours before bed. I guess I can write. And then obviously this morning I was home alone, didn't have anything else to do, so I got a bunch of writing done. And yeah, there's not a lot of routine going on, but I try to write as often as I can. And the routine comes into place after like something is drafted. Like, I have my process of publication, and that's always the same, and I know how to go through all the steps in that. It's just the actual writing that isn't necessarily on a schedule.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I feel like you can't really make any plans until that first draft is done, and you also can't force yourself to get it out. You kind of have to let it come out when it wants to. So, thanks for telling us a little bit more about your writing routine. Tell us, what are your publishing plans for the future?
Yeah, so at this point, I actually six. I have six books at this point, and I'm currently working on my seventh, which is going to be the conclusion to my fantasy trilogy. It has been taking me forever to do because I have to do a complete rewrite, and I can finally see the end of the tunnel on this draft, which is super exciting, and I hope to be able to dive into the next drafts and beyond in the new year, and then hopefully have that book release in the fall, and that'll finish my second series. Um, the Silent Night series is completely finished, so you can actually read all the books in that series now. It's and I want to say like it's over, but like it's complete, so you can read it. And I do plan sometime in the future to return to that world. But Silent's arc is complete, so she might, may have some mentions of her, but she is her story is complete. And then yeah, after that, after I publish my fantasy trilogy finale, I have a lot of other ideas on the back burner. Most of these stories are fantasy novels because I find that dystopian, like once you tell your dystopian tale, like it's hard to tell another one, I find. So I might return to dystopian way in the future, but as of right now, I don't have any ideas for dystopian books. So, yeah.
No, that all sounds awesome. Ooh, a completed series. You can dig into that. Well, with all those books behind you, what made you choose indie publishing?
Yeah, so it actually, like, I never once thought in great detail about doing the traditionally published route. I've never written a query letter, never sent a query, never researched agents, never really researched publishers. And it's not that I don't think that traditional publishing is a good option. I'm sure it is. I've never done it, obviously, but I just, from the beginning, self-publishing is the way that I wanted to go because I wanted to tell my stories and have people read them, and I wanted it now. And I don't know if that sounds like really selfish and egotistical or whatever, but I just I've been on the Instagram community while I was writing, following all kinds of writers, self-published writers, especially, and just seeing the way they did it, and I was like, this looks like a lot of work, but so fulfilling. And I heard the stories of, you write, pardon me, you write your book and that takes however long that takes, and then you query and you query and you query and you get rejection after rejection after rejection, and if you're lucky, you might get an exception, but God knows how long that's going to take. And then the agent, goes off to the publishers and tries to convince them to buy and purchase the book. And if you finally get that done, well, the book takes, at least a year for the publisher to actually put it on shelves, if not longer. And I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, I am so excited about these stories right now, and I might get them published in 5 years. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And the other aspect of it was that I wanted control over my stories. And obviously they're not perfect, they have flaws, but every book does. And I didn't want anybody to take anything away from my books. And like I wanted to tell the stories I wanted to tell in the way that I wanted to tell them. And I had my titles picked out, and I had like, the rest of the series written and ready to go. And I know that a lot of times publishers will only like sign off on the one book, and then if you're lucky, they might be successful enough to do books 2 and 3. And I was like, but book 1A ends on a cliffhanger, so you need book 2 and 3. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it myself. I'm gonna get this book out to readers, and maybe it's not gonna be as successful as a traditional published book might be at first, but it's gonna be out there. And yeah, that's why I went indie publishing. I just wanted full control and it to happen as fast as I could manage.
100%. Yeah, that sounds like, I mean, I don't think that's egotistical or selfish at all. I feel like that's, I mean, I tried the traditional route only because I was like, this might be the only way it can happen. But yeah, it will take a long time and a lot of query letters and a lot of rejection letters back. And I was like, I don't got time. I want it right now. And man, I can do it right now. So once I was able to, I had like the resources to make it happen. Totally went with that. So no, I think, you know, if it's calling to you, you might as well do it. Well, this is our favorite question on the podcast. What does indie publishing mean to you?
Yeah, I think I kind of answered some of it in the previous question, but really it's freedom to do things the way that you want to do it. Tell your stories the way you want to do it, to have the cover you want, to market it the way that you want, and to really just there's so much you can do with indie publishing in terms of the story itself. Like you're not bound by trends and story structure. I mean, obviously your story has to have structure, but like there's a lot more that you can do with it than you typically can in traditional publishing, because traditional publishing for marketing purposes likes to put the books in a box. And so you find a lot less genre mixing, you find a lot less diversity and certain things like that. So there's definitely a lot of freedom in the story writing itself. And then there's also a lot of freedom in marketing the books, because there's no publisher, so you can do whatever you want to market that book. You can give away as many free copies as you want. You can print special editions. You can do sprayed edges. The world is your oyster, and you're only limited by your own resources, but there's endless ideas. So indie publishing is freedom to me.
Yeah, and I think traditional publishing obviously has its benefits, and there's always reasons why people choose one path over the other. Um, but I do agree with you that there are just more things that you can do for a story that you love when you indie publish, because when you traditionally publish, you're kind of waiting for sales to prove to your traditional publisher that it's worth it to put more effort into your books, to maybe get a special edition done. All these sorts of things aren't necessarily going to be done for a debut novelist. You might have a book be traditionally published, but if it doesn't perform well enough, you might not see any additional books in that series, or you might not see any cool artwork being done or anything like that. But we can choose to make those decisions for ourselves when we indie publish, because we love this book and we aren't necessarily bound by this line in the sand that we have to reach before we're considered qualified enough to take a chance on. And yeah, just with indie publishing, you definitely get that freedom. Have you struggled with writer's block, imposter syndrome, or motivation on your writing journey? How have you coped or overcome this?
Yeah, so I struggle with writer's block from time to time, and usually what I do is write anyway. And it sounds counterintuitive and really hard to do, but basically I just push through. I either skip the scene that's not working and move on, or I slog through with minimal, I do the dialogue in that scene and just get through it. But, I have to go back in later and add to it. Or I'll read books or videos on writer's block and, kind of try to get ideas, or I'll read more. But my biggest obstacle I found is burnout. As opposed to writer's block, I tend to work so much and so hard that I hit a wall and then I can't do anything for months on end. So my biggest thing has been finding the balance between writing enough and writing too much. And it's been a very slow progress, but I think I'm finally starting to find it. And I wish I could give more advice on how to do that, but it really looks so different for each person. But it's about, recognizing the signs of burnout when, you're not as excited about the story, when everything feels like a chore, when you're super tired and other things in your life are getting neglected. You're probably working too hard and you need to take a step back. So yeah, definitely taking breaks and taking care of yourself is so, so important.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because I feel like if I'm even struggling with like currently I'm editing book two, and I got feedback that was just like, oh God, I'd have to rewrite freaking everything, and how do I even do that? And how would that reroute the story? So it's like, let's just take a step back, because I was like editing like constantly, like every day. So I was like, let's just take a step back and like go hang out with someone I love, and be away from this little desk in this little room and everything, and just go do something that like fulfills your little. I feel like another author I've heard call it like your energy pennies, which can include also like reading a book, watching a movie, whatever kind of nurtures you and your creative juices. Um, so yeah, well, how do you decide when a book is like done, and ready to move forward, toward editing and publication? Do you feel making this decision is easy or difficult?
I think it's the most difficult thing that a writer has to do, and what takes authors so long to get like a book out. Like, people delay their debut because they can't make this choice. And you just, it's different with every book, but you just have to get to a point where you say to yourself, like, this is enough. I'm okay with the story, and I really enjoy this story. And you get to a point where you start noticing that you're nitpicking. I've heard another author talk about it, where you just take this sentence and move it over there, or you delete a comma, and then the next day you put a comma in. Like, when you're no longer making any major changes to the story, like, you probably should stop touching it. And like, there's only so much you can do. It's never going to be 100% perfect, and that's okay. But yeah, like, basically, I do my first draft. I do my second draft based on like my own notes. I might do a third draft to fix things up, and then I send it to my critique partner. And then I do a draft based off of her feedback. Then it goes to betas. I do their feedback. And then by the time like it's come back from betas, like, it's pretty much done. The only steps left are the fine editing. So like, I know that that's my process. Like, for my one story, after beta readers, I made so many changes that I had to do a second round of beta readers just to make sure that the changes I made sense. But I knew that because like it just been so drastically changed that I needed a second opinion to make sure I didn't screw it up worse than it was before. But your book doesn't need like 5 rounds of beta reading. Like, at that point, you you're too deep in it. You need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and really look at it and say, you know what? I've done what I can. So yeah, it's really hard, but you just have to walk away.
100%. Yeah. I remember, 'cause I asked the same question of another author, and you're kind of done when you're just sick of reading it over and over again. And there's a lot of points where that happens anyway, but like you just can't freaking slog through it, and you really don't know what else you can do, except as you said, put in a comma, take it out, put in a comma, take it out, or maybe you change this little thing over here, and no, it's done. Let it go on to the next step. So yeah, I totally agree. What is your best piece of advice for people who want to self-publish that you wish you had known ahead of time?
The biggest thing I tell people is, however long you think the process is going to take, like, if you decide it's going to take you 12 months, add like 2, 3, 4 months on top of that, and then put your release date. And don't tell anybody what the release date is until you're like 6 months out, because chances are that there is something that's going to go wrong. That's not to scare anybody. It's just the way things are. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to find along the way steps in the process that you didn't know existed, things that you thought you knew how to do but didn't know how to do. Working with other professionals like editors and cover designers and their timelines. And it's just give yourself extra time. I know you want your book to be out. I know you're excited, but there's nothing worse than than me, for example, saying my next book comes out March 1st. And then come like January, I'm like, oh my God, it's nowhere near ready. And you start freaking out and you start rushing and trying to get it done by the release date. Or you have to push the release date back and you've got all this hype and now you've got to redo it. So just give yourself the extra time, because like you're gonna thank yourself. And again, like, I don't like I come up with my release dates. Like right now I have a rough idea of when my next book will be out, but I am not announcing that to the world until I know for sure that that date is going to work and that I can accomplish it by that date. Because you can move your release date as many times as you want until you tell people what it is. So yeah, that's my biggest advice. Give yourself the buffer room. You will need to use it.
Yeah, and I think Morgan and I definitely agree with that. We were kind of pacing alongside each other when it came to releasing both of our debuts. And I had originally wanted to publish in June. I published in August, and even that was kind of rushing it. That was kind of because I knew that people wanted it, and I had been telling people that it was going to be out in the summer, because I thought that was vague enough. It was not vague enough because I was really pushing it. And then Morgan actually published in September. I think she had planned initially to publish in August as well. But things just happen and things pop up, and it wasn't Morgan's fault. It wasn't my fault necessarily that the book came out later. It's just that if I wanted to make it a decent, well-edited book, it needed to stay home a little bit longer before it went out there. So yeah, well, that concludes our interview questions. Are there any future goals or upcoming releases that you want to mention before we wrap up today?
Yeah, so again, I have my third fantasy book coming out sometime next year, late next year. Again, not saying when. And other than that, I am actually going through a cover rebrand for the series that we've been talking about today. So this is what the paperback currently looks like, and I'm changing the covers to match the hardcovers, so they will look like this. The date for that was supposed to happen last month with the 5-year anniversary, but my cover designer encountered some hurdles. So again, giving yourself buffer time. But yeah, these new covers are coming. I don't have an exact date yet, but I'm super excited for it because they look awesome. Hoping by the end of November. So by the time you're watching this video, these new covers should be out. So go grab yourself one. And then I am also working on the audiobooks. Don't have a date for those yet, but they will be coming in 2025 for all 4 books in the series. So I'm super excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah. Remind everyone where they can buy and what your social media handles are.
Yeah, so I am Emma Couette, author on most social medias, so Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. And my books are pretty much available anywhere you can buy books. The biggest one, obviously, being Amazon, but they're available in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. So Barnes and Nobles, Apple Books, Kobo, Waterstones, Booktopia, Books a Million, and et cetera, et cetera. And I also offer signed copies. At the time of doing this interview, I do them on Etsy, but by the time this interview comes out, the signed copies may be on my website. So just check out my social medias. I will definitely tell you there where you can go, but I do offer signed copies as well.
Perfect. Thank you to Emma Couette for being here with us for an incredible interview. Next week, you'll be able to catch Shazara Brooks, author of Stranger in the Pod, here on the Indie Book Nerds podcast.